Hey friends, here I am. It's Chat with Matt. It's episode 5. It's the 30th of January 2019 here in New Zealand. Hello, welcome. How are you guys all going? I know no one's on yet, but those who watch in replay will get to see this. Here we are, Chat with Matt. The year continues, the week continues. The energy's been heavy, my part of the world, in my life, basically, that's what I'm talking about. It's not New Zealand specific or America specific, or light worker specific or whatever. It's just each of us are individuals. I'm becoming more and more aware that we're all dancing in community, in collaboration as individuals. That's the truth of it. And while there always seems to be people who fit together in clusters, I guess, go through similar things, not all of us in the same group all at the same time, I think it's important to remember that whenever you're having a hard time, there are plenty of other people having hard times with you. And while it's very easy for our mind to go looking for a reason, and especially when there's more than one person having a hard time, then we look for group reasons why we're all having a hard time. Oh, the astrology. Oh, the political situation. Oh, some solar flare. Something going on, right, that is provoking. Heavy Joy Kelly. That's provoking some sort of triggering response within us, some sort of discomfort. And our mind loves to try and understand why. And loves the idea, takes, not so much loves the idea, but finds relief in the idea that it's not just us, right? It's not just us. So quite often, it's easy for me to help people by saying, hey, it's not just you, right? We're all going through this on some level, but also we're all individuals, you understand. So it is our journey, and while there might be stuff going on out there that a whole collective is bought into or experiencing for whatever reason, bought into can create thoughts that are not so beneficial because we think it's an intellectual choice, which most of our choices are not. But the point is, there's always someone who's choosing not to, right? There's always someone is staying in their own energy enough to lift themselves out of that. They may feel it, but they're not being overly influenced by it. They're making a choice to stay focused on the perspective that they're choosing to hold around it. Not right, not wrong. So don't feel that if you are having a hard time, that's a wrongness, because generally, what I like to believe is that our higher self is managing this process as best we can. And while we all have choice as to how much we allow ourselves to be influenced by the collective energies that we're existing in, while we all have choice how much we choose to allow ourselves to be influenced by the energies that are coming up from within us to clear, right? Because that process is going on, whether it's being triggered by a collective experience, so that we're all sort of collectively going through a similar triggering experience where the same sorts of energies are coming up within us and we're all feeling similar symptomology, or whether it's purely individual, it doesn't really matter. It's the same process. It's because the truth is, if you don't have bits of trauma or energy that align with what the collective is going through, you won't feel it at all. Hello, brother Adriano, and hello, Vesna. Hello. Welcome. So the point is to understand that while the collective is always going through stuff, and while we may be well influenced by that, or we may feel a bit removed from that, we still have choice. We still have choice no matter where we are on the spectrum of how deeply we're triggered by collective stuff or how minorly we're triggered by collective stuff. We have choice as to what we are choosing to focus on, what we are choosing to align with, and understand that it's not a matter of being really fear-based disciplined. What am I trying to say here? It's not about trying to push your way through this without having response. It's not that you're not supposed to be triggered And even if you're triggered deeply, that's not necessarily a bad, wrong thing, right? How long you choose to stay in that triggering situation is, of course, your choice. And the point is that it doesn't need to be as protracted or as necessarily intensely discomfortable or disrupting to your life that maybe you're letting it be, right? It's a matter of working this balance out between being compassionate with ourselves, being understanding of what we're going through and the difficulty of the emotional purging and all of this rubbish that's coming out from within us, whether it's a collective thing or whether it's an individual thing, or most likely it's both at once. So having a compassion for that experience without allowing ourselves to dwell in that experience for longer than we really would serve us. Ultimately, it comes down to what's going to benefit you the most. Sometimes feeling things very intently and intensely benefits us. To have an intense experience, a triggering reaction to it, is actually beneficial sometimes to some degree. And also, it would also benefit us reasonably regularly to lift ourselves or expand ourselves out of that experience quicker rather than later. Sooner rather than later, that's what I tried to say. Lift ourselves out of that sooner rather than later. Not because we have to prove ourselves as right or spiritual by lifting above it and not being affected. It's not about, trying to armor ourselves against the experience. It's not about making the experience wrong and therefore trying to push it away. It's about choosing what is going to benefit us, what is actually going to allow you to be more joyfully present in the world rather than feel that you're just getting pushed around by what you are basically releasing. Hello, Georgina. Hello, Barbara. Welcome. So, okay, I'm going to get into this question that Sylvie's popped in, and then Denise has also popped in a great question as well on the tail of that. So that was sort of a prelude to what I'm talking about, maybe. So Sister Sicilian's, her name's Sylvie, but she goes by Sicilian. Not want to blow her cover. But anyway, here's her question. Hi. That's always a good way to start, isn't it? To be hi. I see that there are no requests. That's because she's written this in about an hour ago. I have a question about depression. What can be the energetical reason for that? I'm going to read the whole question. There's always my intention, but I quite often don't. I sense that I release stuff for my higher self regarding the things that they are or he is dealing with in other spaces, right? Okay, so that's good. So I cry it out or move through me more easily because I'm physical and emotional. How to drag oneself out of the depression hole. Okay, so let's break this down. What is the reason for depression? The energetical reason for depression. Hey, Sister Jeanette. Now, what I would like to point out that potentially, how are we going to put this? How are we going to start? Okay, the whole guise of what is the energetical reason for depression? Well, perhaps there isn't one. Perhaps depression isn't a thing, it's just a response to things. Depression is a symptom, and so it doesn't really have, well, it does have a cause, but does it have a reason? It has basically, I'm dancing here, aren't I? Basically what I'm trying to say is depression itself has been labelled as this thing, and really it is just a protracted vibration or a protracted experience of a low vibration. Depression is kind of like a contraction around sadness or hopelessness or some other low vibrations that carry an overtone of pessimism. An overtone of pessimism. Doesn't mean you're a pessimistic person because you're experiencing depression, but generally the experience of depression is somehow, and that length of time is completely up to individuals, right, when they decide they're in a depression as opposed to when they're experiencing sadness or when they're experiencing hopelessness, or when they're experiencing some other form of what we would call depression, right? Some other vibration that we link to depression, low motivation, don't feel like doing anything. So it's an interesting thing, this thing called depression. And it really comes down to, when do we start to identify ourselves with the vibrations that we're feeling in an ongoing way? We don't, depression has been made by our society as quite a wrong thing, because depression leads people out of productivity. When people are experiencing this thing that we call depression, they tend not to act. They tend not to go out and work, and they tend not to go out and spend very much. So they basically fall out of the capitalistic society, and thus it's, perceived by those who run the society as a as a wrong thing, right? This thing called depression. You might notice that we don't nearly stigmatify mania nearly as badly or nearly as harshly as we stigmatize depression. So mania, which is the opposite of depression, is when people are unrealistically, for want of a better term, optimistic. They're upbeat. They're high vibrational beyond what their circumstances justify, which is basically what the opposite of depression, which is basically when someone is sad beyond what their circumstances justify, right? Because if you're sad because, something's just happened, your house has just burnt down, you've just lost your partner, your child has died, something like that, it's justified, and it's not nearly as quickly labelled as depression. It's labelled as grieving. It's labelled as a stress response, because it is linked to an external situation that is the correlation is easily drawn, and so there is a reason for feeling sad. Therefore, it's not stigmatized nearly as badly as when you're just feeling a low vibration for no particular reason, and then it's labeled as depression, right? Some sort of illness, it's put it down as an illness, that you're feeling this emotion when there is no good cause in your external world to justify it. Right. Now, mania, the opposite side of that, is when someone is high vibration all the time. They go out and spend a lot of money. They go out and do a lot of things. Society doesn't mind that, right? Society doesn't mind that. So it's not nearly as interesting what's the right word? Condition. Although, of course, it is a condition and it is treatable, because a lot of people, when they're in that state, do things in a rational way and cause mayhem in their own life and in the life of their families. And it's interesting, from my point of view, definitely more people experience depression than experience mania in our societies, which I believe is just a reflection of our recent and relatively recent past, distant past, right? Past lifetimes, through the successive of centuries that we've been through, it's been pretty dense and dark here. So more of us are carrying a load of depressive type vibrations, dense type vibrations, sadnesses, hopelessness, worthlessness, trauma in that regard, than people carrying the opposite. Anyway. So Jeanette's written in, I've been feeling low-level depression for the past couple of years, doing stuff, keeping active work-wise. Makes me feel good, though not necessarily good for me per se. A lack of joy is probably a better term for it, rather than perceived as depression. Yeah, so that's a great distinction, Jeanette. A lot of us have struggled to align with the vibration of joy, myself included. Many of us have had a difficult time in finding the fun in this world. Many of us have had a difficult time in really allowing ourselves to be habitually upbeat, right? And so low-level depression, I know, is something I've experienced my whole life, pretty much my whole life. I've not been particularly happy on this plane. It's been quite a journey. It's required quite a lot of discipline to keep showing up and keep choosing to act in empowered ways, to act in, functional ways when you don't really feel like engaging with this world. Because this world seems very ho-hum to many of us who are more spiritually advanced. Many of us are carrying all sorts of remnants from our past that weigh heavy on us, and many of us really don't see the point in engaging terribly much with this world that seems so corrupt and unfair and difficult in so many ways, right? Which is leading on to Denise's question in a moment. Hopefully, let me make sure I'm managing my time well. So the point, so let's cut to the question here around what Sylvie asked is, what is the energetic reason for it? And I believe it's basically just vibrations that we're carrying from the past is the core root of it. The intensifying factor, I feel, and this is very, very important in my opinion, what tends to keep us stuck in depression or this, this vibration of low vibration is a stigmatization of it, and particularly our own judgments held towards ourselves for feeling something that society doesn't perceive as particularly good, right, or proper. So we label ourselves as being depressed, as being sad, as being taciturn, right? It's an expression my mother used to use to describe me, which basically means habitually quiet, not really interacting with the world, not really getting excited by the world, being a little bit withdrawn, aloof, right? Another term that many of you will probably identify with, not really throwing ourselves into life, standing back, playing safe, not emotionally engaging with the world. A lot of all of this, what is perpetuating this, intensifying it in our life, is the idea that it's wrong to be that way. The idea that it's wrong to be that way. So we label ourselves as wrong. We have a resistance towards depression, and therefore, what you resist will persist. So, as I read through Sylvie's question here, the whole idea, the underlying vibration is one of non-acceptance, right? I have, what's the reason for it? I sense it's released from my stuff, but, how do I get out of it? How do I, how to drag oneself out of the depression hole? And so for me, to answer that question, what I would say is stop trying to drag yourself out of the hole and find acceptance for the vibration of depression, understanding that it is not a wrongness to start with. I understand, really I do, that staying in that experience of depression is not fun. And so we don't, quote unquote, want to stay there. But the way out is not to make what you're experiencing wrong and then try and fix it or try and drag yourself out of it. It is to accept how you are and allow yourself to naturally relax into the experience that you're having so that you expand out of it. Hey, Sister Charlie, how are you? Lots of O's on your hello and lots of hearts too. Thank you very much. I missed what the down thing was. Down, as in down, Jeanette, as in just the overriding depression, the overriding experience of not being up. Sister Emily Rose has also joined us. Like, I have all these great experiences, good stuff, etc. How can I be like this? Yeah, exactly right. I grew up, and for me, just as a correlation, this whole thing, that I've gone through, and I believe a lot of people have gone through here, hey, Sister Leni, with gratitude, right? I've struggled my whole life not really feeling grateful because I wasn't really enjoying myself, right? And so I carried this label of ungrateful about myself, even though there was nothing wrong with my life. Loving parents, reasonably affluent, not terribly affluent, but a comparison to the most of the world, reasonably affluent, right? Growing up in Sydney, Australia, living on the beach, doing all sorts of great things, right? No real reason to not be as high as a kite, really engaging with life and feeling how lucky and grateful I am for everything I have. But that wasn't my experience. From within me, I felt resentful for being here. I felt low-level depression. What's the point? Useless, hopeless, worthless, not good enough to be here. And so you can't feel grateful when you're in that vibration. So then you label yourself as ungrateful, another big wrongness. So not only is depression wrongness, not only is being aloof wrong, but being ungrateful for it all is very wrong too, when you don't have a good excuse for being ungrateful. So you put all of this wrongness on top of yourself, and then of course, so you're disconnecting the whole time. You're fighting with yourself. You're beating yourself up for feeling beat up, and it just leads you into the hole of depression, right? You start to feel very trapped in this cycle of wanting to be better, but yet trying to be better in order to make yourself feel better about yourself, right? You're trying to improve yourself so that you can feel good about yourself, and it's not going to work, right? It's not going to work. It has to happen in the opposite direction. You have to allow yourself to relax into the experience that you're having and accept yourself for exactly as you are right now, so that you can slowly but surely allow your vibration to expand, because your vibration is not going to expand out of the hole of depression from fight. It's not going to expand out of the hole of depression from this idea that you're wrong until you fix yourself, right? This trying to fix yourself so that you're no longer carrying the label of depression doesn't work. It doesn't work. The way out of this experience is to relax into acceptance and to just choose very, very naturally to allow more of your truth to be present in your being, so that more of the stuff, the residues of the past, the traumas that are left in your field that were perpetuating this sense of not good enough, this sense of what's the point of being here, this disconnect, right? These experiences from the past that you can't intellectually remember but are influencing your energy field and your emotions, allowing all of that to release. And we know what release is, right? When we're holding on to something, we are tight. We're clenching. To release it, we just need to relax, right? And it falls out of our hands. That's it. The same emotionally. If you're trying to release something, it isn't going to work. You have to relax, and then naturally your hands open. Naturally your energy's open, and things that aren't serving you can fall out. So yeah, acceptance. That's basically what it's all about. So staying in allowance is hard. I understand, Sylvie and Denise. I'm reading two questions at once now. So understanding, as Sylvie's pointed out, there are reasons for feeling these vibrations. Some of it is our higher self processing stuff from other dimensions. Sometimes it's we're acting in service for our society, our community, our family. We're running vibrations through our field. When you can basically find acceptance for whatever you are feeling without making yourself wrong, no matter how emotionally uncomfortable it might be, when you disconnect from having to fix it and just allow it to be, go, wow, I'm really feeling emotionally like this right now. And that doesn't necessarily need to affect who you know yourself to be, right? And how you're choosing to act. We can all act in ways that are not so influenced by our emotions. It's not stifling our emotions at all. Accept them for what they are, exactly as they are. Be willing to tell people, wow, I'm feeling emotionally this and emotionally that, but choosing not to be, I am that, right? The difference between saying, I'm feeling the emotion of sadness right now and I don't really have a good reason why, as opposed to, oh, I'm really sad. I am really sad. No, you're not really sad. You're experiencing intense sadness, and there is a complete difference between the two. And until you really start to be a little bit disciplined with yourself, or a lot disciplined with yourself, and pick yourself up every time you try and label yourself with the emotion that you are feeling, that's when your life will change. When you choose to see the distinction between what you are feeling and who you are, right? That is what is going to help you change your life. Okay, so moving on to what Denise asked about is, how many people seem to be checking out or having really, really hard times right now? There are, it's true. There seems to be more and more people for no good reason leaving the planet. People seem to get sick and go just like that. People seem to commit suicide just like that. People seem to have accidents or just really weird experiences and die just like that. Now, part of me says, was that always happening? We just weren't so aware of it. Is this just a function of better communication happening now, more information flowing, that we are more and more aware of how many people are dying and leaving the planet? Or is this really a phenomena that's going on at the moment, and more people are choosing to leave for whatever reason, whether their higher self's calling them back because it'd be a great time to prepare to be reincarnated on the plane into a brand new little baby, and have a better upbringing than perhaps they have had, or what else could be going on. I'm not here to answer that so much as to give you some help in dealing with it, because as Sister Denise has put in, right, I'm not making it wrong or right, but it does depress me sometimes because the parade does not seem to ease up long enough before I'm grieving another person or pet. So what I feel would help us all in this process is finding a perspective, right, of understanding what aspect of us is grieving. What is perpetuating the grieving process? And I'm not making grieving wrong at all, understand that, right? So grieving is a natural part of living on the planet, right? We're all going to lose things and people and beings that are dear to us, that meant something to us, that really added joy or security or something to our life that we appreciated. We're all going to lose things that we are appreciating in this life, and that necessarily is going to trigger our egoic self into a process of grieving. I don't believe our higher self is grieving at all. I don't believe our soul is really grieving, because we don't lose the connection when the physical body of that being falls away. We don't. In fact, it could quite often be the opposite, that we actually gain somehow a deeper connection with them on a soul level, because potentially they are less distracted by the body that they're in. Anyway, but that's a conjecture. I don't need to go down that path. Let's really work at how can we allow ourselves to grieve, but in a way that is not so consuming. How can we gently change our perspective such that we allow ourselves to go through processes of grief in a more effective way, in a more expeditious way, in a way that doesn't diminish our ability to enjoy living on the planet, so that we don't feel so depressed as we go through the process of acclimatizing or acclimating, as Americans say, acclimating to the idea that you have lost something that was important to you. Because that's an egoic identification, right? And while it's not wrong, because it's certainly a big part of our lives that we get egoically attached to people, right? And I'm not one to get into the Buddhist philosophy of needing to maintain non-attachment to everything. I believe attachment is a very normal part of being human, but it's just to what degree are you attached, and to how much suffering are you opening yourself up to when you lose something that you were attached to. So again, it's about balance. It's about allowing the attachments to be relatively healthy, and then also giving yourself the space, the breathing space, to allow yourself to relax through the process of losing it. Yeah, Charlie, I can't actually remember what was on Choosing to Choose. I know it's the one when I'm walking on the beach. Well, I've done 3 or 4 of those now, but it's probably it's a good. My goodness, I've come to the end of my half hour. I'm going to pull it for an extra 5 minutes or so because I'm not finished here. But yeah, Choosing to Choose is a good MP3 to help us to strengthen ourselves in our ability to choose what perspective we're holding towards whatever situation we're experiencing. Okay, I just missed that, Barbara. I just scrolled through a little bit too quick. It seems my grieving comes in waves. For a space of time, I will be okay, and then something triggers. Yeah, something will trigger a thought or a memory, then I feel the sadness of missing the physical presence of someone. And it does get easier with time. Yeah. And it does get easier with time. And what will help it to get easier is just to be, it's not to make the grieving wrong when you get triggered, but just to remind yourself that I've just been triggered into the memory of something that has passed. And there's a part of me that is still missing that. And so when you come to the understanding that there's a part of me that's still missing something, you can choose to breathe in the vibration that you used to get from the experience of that person or thing, because we do grieve things and situations as well. We grieve the loss of a job. We grieve the loss of an experience that we used to have, whether it was being in a band or whether it was owning a car. You can grieve that when it comes to an end, because if it was something that really had meaning for you in your life, there was a relationship formed there. It's not just, it's not stupid to grieve that any more than it's, good to grieve the loss of, a person that carried a title that was you're supposed to grieve, e.g. your parents or your children or your spouse or, your best friend, whatever. There's all of these supposed to's, what grief is appropriate and what grief is, not, what's the right word, appropriate. So, I just got to flick back to what the question was. Does depress me. The prey does not seem to ease up long enough before I'm grieving another person or pet. It's hard to stay in allowance. Yeah. So it is hard to stay in allowance and be in allowance that it's hard. Okay. So Denise and everyone, I don't think that this is an easy thing to deal with at all as an embodied human, to deal with the loss and to deal with grief and to not to find ourselves too, quote unquote, depressed when we're dealing with successive grieving processes that seem to be overlapping because they're coming so quickly. But perhaps this is all part of our evolutionary process right now as embodied humans who are choosing to be a little bit more spiritually aware on this process, to really find our way into a space where we can deal with this, where we can choose to maintain a more expansive perspective on the understanding that people and things are choosing to leave the planet, to leave our life, that we are tending to get stripped away from many of the things that we have found what have we found in them? Security, basically. We found it's kept us in our human story. It's kept it in our egoic story. It's kept us in our identification story. Many of the things that are keeping us identified as a smaller human are being stripped away from us right now. I think that beyond a doubt is happening across the board with many of us who are choosing to step up right now. So as we're choosing to step up, we're having to let go of many things that we found our security and our comfort in before, and that includes relationships with people, and many of those people may be choosing to pop off planet right now. So breathing deep and allowing ourselves to move through this experience. That's the guts. Okay, my friends, I have overstayed my 30-minute window of time. So it is time for me to say au revoir for another week. And I'll catch up with you again this time, same place next week. And we can continue any discussions that you wish in more detail or in other tangents as you feel to direct me. So much love to you all, my friends. Namaste for now. Keep smiling. Keep choosing to maintain an expansive and an empowered attitude to life. Doesn't necessarily need to be upbeat, but choose to allow yourself to find acceptance for what you're going through and really choose to trust that it is all serving you in some way, even if you don't intellectually understand it. When you choose to trust that it is serving you, then you can relax deeper into it, and that is going to help you shift through whatever you're experiencing. Resistance creates persistence. If you're not enjoying what you're experiencing, then please choose not to resist it so that it can leave your life. Much, much love to you all, my friends. Bye for now. Bye-bye. The finish button, right? When am I going to get this right? Third time.